I think it's important to remember a few key things when you're entering into something as complex and as large and expensive as the Space Act Agreement that defined the commercial orbital transportation system. Um, and that's first, you need to understand the scope that you're trying to achieve here. And that is both on the industry side and on the government side. What are you really trying to achieve? And do you understand what it takes to make that happen? That's very hard early in a program. Um, I think in the case of COTS, people had a pretty good understanding of what the real goals were, which was to deliver cargo commercially to the International Space Station. How that was going to happen is really the kind of the next point that you need to pay attention to, and not just the technical and operational scope, but what's it going to cost really to do this, and what is everybody willing to invest? And then add some buffer, some reserve on that so that when things do happen, you're not surprised by that and you don't have to shut the program down. As far as COTS becoming a program that branched off into further successes, I think the key was that NASA was open to a public-private partnership where there was investment from both sides. But in addition, before the program was even completed, there was a contract available, or at least possible for the competitors to compete for, that gave you kind of the prize at the end of the rainbow if you were successful. Without that, I think sometimes these partnerships don't always go forward as well as they could because they almost always end up being harder, take longer, and cost more than people anticipate. But if you know that you've got a contract that could last for years and that the program, such as the ISS, will actually benefit from it, it motivates both sides to put a lot into it and make sure it's successful. This is just the beginning of something that I think will see more commercial activity in space, and it's setting the stage for a model that can be I believe, emulated in the future. But in this case, with COTS, it was more of we really need to commercialize aspects of the space station. Cargo is a good way to begin that, so let's see what we can do. And industry and NASA work together to help make that happen. As you may recall, not every commercial company involved in aerospace jumped into that swimming pool. And it took some companies that had some ability to take some risks and who saw this as a new opportunity for them that may have carried risks that other more conservative companies may not have been willing to carry. And it's working out. Prior to the awarding of the Space Act Agreement on COTS, which is different than the Commercial Resupply Services contract, Orbital was already developing the Antares launch vehicle as a replacement for a medium-class lift such as a Delta II to fill that gap in the marketplace that the company saw. So we were already down the road towards developing that capability in the right class to deliver cargo to the space station. The Cygnus spacecraft, which of course is the key to getting the cargo into orbit and to the space station, built on the legacy of Orbital's GEO satellites as well as prior LEO satellites, but it was larger, more complex, and it required the rendezvous and proximity operations that had not been utilized very much in commercial vehicles at all. And so that was the biggest stretch. But and probably the lowest TRL of all the components on the spacecraft. But in terms of the structure, the basic avionics, the systems management, the power systems, electrical power, that was all very high TRL at the beginning of the program. The launch vehicle itself was just beginning development, but was moving down that path and was using proven components rather than, coming up with anti-gravity or something that was pretty low TRL. As we negotiated the how to comply with the requirements, we were keeping the long-term in mind, and also NASA was keeping the long-term in mind. And I think if you look at these, how we negotiated them on COTS, how we implemented them on CRS, and apply that kind of principle in future programs, you'll actually have the most effective program possible in a public-private partnership. And you can use more commercial practices. You can allow the customer to take risk rather than the government taking it all. And you can provide a services type approach rather than buying hardware and then owning it and not knowing what to do with it when you don't need it anymore. which is sounds a little bit facetious, but that's what happens a lot of times. I think it will also prevent programs from being canceled prematurely when you've got a shared responsibility here. And when you can sit down at the table and negotiate the key requirements that you're trying to comply with on both sides, and then look at the cost benefit and the risk management, the level of risk that you're trying to manage, I think you end up with the best of both worlds in how you're going to go forward to provide a service to whether it's the International Space Station or a lunar outpost or a Mars mission, whatever commercial support is appropriate for that. Or whether you're just trying to make sure that we are successfully staying in low Earth orbit so that NASA can go beyond low Earth orbit. Putting good commercial practices in place and negotiating how you're going to comply with the requirements bilaterally, I think will pay off big dividends.